Da 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 da. Yep, I'm not going to win any prizes for my singing voice, my humming voice, or anything along those lines. Then again, I do live in a country where Leonard Cohen won a Juno for his singing voice, or for his singing anyways, performance. And he was good enough to actually comment on that when he won his Juno Award. To the effect only in Canada would he win such an award. Bless his soul. Whatever a soul might be. I mean, his body is departed. We no longer will be getting new work from him. I don't see the bacteria of decay suddenly coming out with a compilation album, a big chorus of microbes consuming his flesh going, hey, here's the last track. But at the same time, much of what he emitted in his world, both in the form of like his little son, or I guess grown son, and as his body of work, is still out there propagating. At what point do you actually separate someone's work from the artist? That's an interesting one because it's reassuring to actually think about the fact, yeah, Leonard Cohen's still going. Probably outlive a lot of us. Probably in the same way that Genghis Khan's DNA is still going around. Something like 16 million male Siberian descendants they figured out after they mapped the genome of the human species and started looking at individual populations. And at the same time, it's important to be able to separate the artist from their work. For myself, the example would be Axl Rose of Guns N' Roses. I rather enjoy a lot of Axl Rose's vocal performances and the work of Guns N' Roses collectively, but I don't think, even to this day, I would like to be locked in a small room with the fellow. Maybe going through all the things he has, maturation after heroin, after being a big star, and all that comes positive and negative with that. Maybe he's matured. But nonetheless, there's part of me that just is not liked that fellow, not knowing him personally, ever since he showed up on stage at Elton John's memorial concert, high, drunk, whatever. It's like, wow, you get a chance to actually like pay tribute. And that's what you pay tribute with. I've also screwed up myself that way. That's another point of the separation between a person, their individual moments, and their work. Without having mortal frailty, how could any artist like even pretend to have anything, especially in the lyrical aspects, to say about what it is to be human, to have some kind of commonality? Yay, I have no attachment whatsoever and no connection with the rest of the human race, but they love my work, don't they? That would be an odd one. It's a strange thing, this idea of like the separation of the artist from the work. For myself, at least, goes back to a short story by Stephen King, where a black woman who, presumably in the States, with a mulatto son who's a great writer, is explaining the odd story of how that son came to be. And that basically, through, I don't remember it clearly, it's almost 2 decades ago, through sort of an instinct, the child was conceived almost parthenogenically, like our supposed messiah, by her eating a rather dislikable but successful author's spooge off of his bed linen. This is a rather repugnant and abhorrent image, and it's a very interesting analogy for taking the work, getting something positive out of something that's, wow, that guy is a total piece of shit. It's very apropos, especially when we're dealing with someone like Mr. King, who writes of this. It's almost a very modernistic thing. A writer, speaking of writing, it just layers and layers and layers. He seems to be fond of this. In the weird labyrinth that he created over the years, he apparently started writing in large part as self-directed therapy to deal with the nightmares that plagued him when he was a youth. And at the end of things, I don't know if he's got much more left to publish. I sort of stopped reading his stuff. I mean, I was a prolific enough reader for a long time that I had read almost everything he had written for a while. He's really light reading. But even though I didn't like it, with the Dark Tower series, The Gunslinger, etc., Insomnia, all these different books, you start tying together all of these works which were expressions of his subconscious into this strange labyrinthine kingiverse, whichever you want to call it. In that aspect, whether I like his stuff or not, or whether I'd enjoy his company or not, I suspect he actually would be a fairly decent enough guy. I'm somewhat happy for this kid who was having nightmares way back. There's a funny thing with decency and like this darkness thing, similar to how about 2 years ago, was it 3 years ago, when this thing that we can call Islamophobia really started coming up in North America. The people offering in one city in the States to actually walk Muslim women if they felt unsafe walking in supposedly free America, to walk them and be their guardians against anyone unjustly interfering with them, were a group of Satanists. Let that sink in for a bit. Admittedly, of course, these would be LaVeyan Satanists, meaning they're anti-theistic, rather than necessarily worshippers of a beast, which is always a weird one. It's like, okay, are you celebrating the worst of yourself, or are you just like really a fan of taking the underdog loser side of the entire thing? I mean, like if you're going to go buy into Christianity, it's pretty well got the end written out. That's sort of a strange choice. I don't think I've ever actually met a beast worshipper, at least not knowingly. But it's something that applies actually to my work in the security field and actually just my life philosophy in general. You can barely see anything with this little camera, but what I do see, I could translate fairly well onto black fabric using bleach. That's my chosen two-dimensional art form, and it works very well. That's a kind of subtractive art as opposed to putting darkness onto light, because the world to me actually does exist in darkness, except where light is incident upon it. The point on that is, as a security guard, it's an industry where a lot of people understand this. Likewise, a lot of metalheads, at least the nicer ones, as opposed to the worst cliches, which are actually fairly uncommon in my experience. If you're not familiar with the darkness, no one will ever carry a flashlight. And I guess that's it. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine. I'm Mr. Full Time.